There's something quietly powerful about the moment a melody slips into your mind and refuses to leave. We've all experienced it, right? The way a song lyric lodges itself somewhere behind the eyes, replaying at unexpected times, looping without permission, almost as if your brain has decided, this matters, keep it. And if we pay attention as language teachers, there's a crucial lesson hidden inside that phenomenon. Memory is not purely logical. It is emotional, rhythmic, embodied, and deeply sensory. The brain doesn't just store words, it stores experiences, with melody being one of the most efficient containers for experience we've ever invented. So, today, I want to take you on a long, reflective journey through something we think we understand but so often underestimate. The use of music in language learning, not just as a supplement, not just as a fun moment in class, but as a scientifically grounded, pedagogically robust tool for memorization and pronunciation. A tool that taps into deep cognitive pipelines far older than formal language itself. And as we move through this, I want you to think about your own experiences, all right? The songs that shaped you, the rhythms that stay with you, the melodies you've repeated without effort. Because the truth is, every language learner carries a soundtrack with them. We just don't always realize how essential that soundtrack is. And as I always say, sit down comfortably, get yourself a coffee, and let's get started.
Woo! Let's go!
Now let's go deeper in memory. So when we talk about memory, we tend to think of flashcards, spaced repetition apps, notebooks filled with vocabulary lists. But the human brain didn't evolve to memorize lists. It evolved in rhythm. Before writing, before alphabets, structured grammar, there was chant, poetry, call and response, the beat of feet on earth, the cadence of collective voice. So memory in many cultures was music. Epic stories were sung. Lineages were chanted. Rituals were preserved through repeated melody, right? Some of the world's oldest surviving texts, the Vedas, the Iliad, the Odyssey, were performed musically long before they were written. And why? Because melody locks memory in place. It gives language a skeleton to hold onto. And this is where modern language learning often misses the mark. We ask learners to memorize vocabulary cold, to internalize grammar in silence, to pronounce words without ever feeling the beat of them. Pronunciation divorced from rhythm is like dancing without music. Technically possible, but spiritually empty. And research in cognitive neuroscience is clear on this. Musical memory and linguistic memory overlap significantly. Studies by Patel, Gordon, and Slevsk show that musical attitude or aptitude correlates with phonological awareness, with pitch discrimination, with prosody recognition. This is why musicians tend to pick up accents faster. And it's not because they're more talented. It's because their brain is already trained to hear micro differences in sound. They've practiced listening with precision and that precision transfers. But here's the part we don't talk about enough. You don't need to be a musician to benefit from this. The average language learner already has a lifetime of musical exposure. Lullabies, pop songs, hymns, childhood television intros, school chants, national anthems, you name it. So the brain doesn't care if you've studied theory. It cares about repetition, structure, and emotional engagement. And music gives you all three at once. Now, think about the way learners store new vocabulary. If I ask you right now to memorize 10 random words, completely disconnected from each other, your brain starts sweating. You might manage 3, maybe 4. But if I put those same 10 words into a simple melody, a catchy, stupidly sticky melody, suddenly remembering them becomes effortless. Because the words now ride on a track. They are no longer floating in space. They are held by rhythm, supported by tone, position within predictable timing. Yeah. This is why children's educational programming relies heavily on songs. But I'll be honest, adults need them just as much. We've just been conditioned to feel embarrassed by simple tools. One of the most successful adult Spanish learners I've ever taught improved his pronunciation not through drills, not through IPA charts, not through phonetic lectures, but through reggaeton. Can you believe that? Reggaeton. Yes, sounds pretty bad. It's the reality. He listened obsessively, repeated chorus, mimic the intonation patterns, and slowly internalize the flow of Spanish syllables in a way most textbooks can never achieve. And that brings us to another fundamental idea. Pronunciation is not about individual sounds. It is about the music of the language, the flow, the stress patterns, the rhythm, the timing. And music is the most direct gateway into that. Yes. We tend to think of language as symmetrical, but they're not. And here's something actually for those teachers that still believe that learning a language is like learning math. English loves stress, Spanish loves syllables, Portuguese loves melody. That rising, falling musical contour. Russian loves consonant clusters, but also has a hidden rhythm in its stress. Stress time structure. Chinese attaches meaning to pitch movement itself. So when learners struggle with pronunciation, they are not fighting sounds. They're fighting an unfamiliar musical system. And no tool teaches musical system faster than actual music. So you can sit with IPA charts for months and still not feel the rhythm of a language. But one afternoon of singing along, suddenly something unlocks. Suddenly the tongue stops fighting. The voice finds its flaw. And that's not magic. That's neural mapping. When you sing, you activate motor areas, auditory areas, emotional areas, and memory areas simultaneously. So language becomes embodied, and embodied memory sticks. For sure, all of you know about it. I've worked with students whose pronunciation transformed completely after they began shadowing songs. Even my kindergarteners. Not reading lyrics first, just listening, feeling, mimicking, repeating. Just bring me a memory right now. I would like to share with you. I got my kindergarteners, and I remember I started teaching them a couple of rock songs. And one day I was just listening to "We Will Rock You," and then one of the kids started coming to me, and she was like, "What is that?" And then she started like mimicking the sounds, the clapping, and suddenly she just learned to say, "We will rock you." Amazing. So here is the point: mimicking, repeating, right? Um, when you begin actually to develop phonemic awareness naturally, without overthinking, that's the point. They learn to soften plosives, round vowels, glide through diphthongs, or stretch syllables where needed, all by following the melody. The song guided the mouth. And in English, it's important. But let's go deeper, because music does something even more profound. It reduces anxiety. And moving on to this part, language anxiety. Something that not everybody likes to talk about sometimes. Even on my social media, on LinkedIn, people don't like to talk about anxiety or things like that. They just want to avoid topics like this. But language anxiety is one of the biggest barriers to both memorization and pronunciation. So when your body is tense, your brain shuts down retrieval pathways. Music, on the other hand, softens that tension. It lowers the affective filter, something that Krashen talked about long before neuroscience caught up. Emotional safety increases memory formation. When learners engage with music, they enjoy dopamine levels rise. Dopamine strengthens long-term memory consolidation. So no, it's not just motivational fluff to say music makes learning easier. It is biologically accurate. Another element we underestimate is identity. When learners choose a song they connect with, they internalize not just the language but a cultural voice. They begin to imitate not abstract pronunciation, but the pronunciation of someone whose style they admire or they like. This creates motivation, but more importantly, it creates a consistent model to mimic. It gives learners a persona to step into. And identity based learning always sticks deeper than obligation based learning, right? Now, let me tell you another example about a Chinese student I work with who struggled immensely with English rhythm. She spoke beautifully, but mechanically, with every syllable equal, as if reading from a machine. One day, I asked her who her favorite English language singer was. She shyly admitted it was Adele. And I said, perfect. For the next week, I don't want you to practice any academic English. I want you to sing along to Adele. She did. And after 7 days, her stress patterns had transformed. Not perfectly, obviously, but meaningfully. Music had done what drills could not. And remember, pronunciation is emotional. And when we treat it as purely technical, we rob learners of the humanity in their voice. Music returns that humanity. It allows them to play, experiment, stretch sounds, exaggerate, laugh, fail, or try again. The classroom becomes a rehearsal studio, not a courtroom. But memorization, that's where music becomes almost supernatural. I've had students memorize entire verb conjugation charts because I turned them into melodies. I've had kids memorize 40 vocabulary words in 15 minutes because the words were embedded in a song. And here's the wild part: music bypasses the conscious mind, it creates automaticity, the holy grail of language learning. You don't have to remember lyrics, they just appear. And once a word appears in a musical context enough times, it begins to appear in spontaneous speech. That's when you know the memory stuck. Music also helps learners chunk language. Another cognitive advantage, for example, when you listen to a song, you don't memorize every syllable individually. You memorize phrases as units. This mirrors natural language acquisition, where the brain stores multi-word chunks, not single words. Songs make these chunks rhythmic, so it's like predictable, familiar, and repeated exposure turns them into linguistic reflexes. Now, let's acknowledge something important. Not all music helps. There are songs that are too fast, too mumbly, or metaphorically dense. There are genres that distort pronunciation intentionally. Trap, for example, stretches vowels beyond recognition. K-pop often mixes multiple languages. Some artists have regional accents that may confuse learners. But rather than avoiding this, teachers can leverage them strategically. Fast songs build listening agility. Accented songs build dialect awareness. Mixed language songs build code switching sensitivity. But the most effective songs for beginners? Simple melodies, predictable rhythm, clear pronunciation, and high repetition, like the nursery rhymes, children music, or slow ballads. Acoustic covers. Not because adults are children, but because the brain behaves like a child when learning a new language. It needs clarity, repetition, and emotional engagement. But of course, as learners advance, complexity becomes beneficial. Rap for listening speed, R&B for vowel stretching, pop for connected speech, rock for stress patterns, classical or folk for cultural intuition. The key is intentional listening, not passive background noise. Music use strategically becomes a full-scale immersion system. And now, let's talk about exercises. Not in a checklist way, but in a narrative way. Imagine this. Students pick a song. They listen once without lyrics. They let the melody wash over them. They listen again, but paying attention to the rhythm. Then they look at the lyrics. They identify words they know, words they almost know, and words they don't know. Then they shadow the singer, not trying to be perfect, but trying to feel the rhythm. Then they sing along. They read the lyrics out loud without music, keeping the musicality. Then they record themselves. They compare. This entire sequence forms a multisensory learning loop: hearing, speaking, reading, emotional engagement, and self awareness. This one activates every channel we want activated. And one exercise I love is the melody rewrite. Take a song learners know well. Replace the lyrics with target vocabulary. Keep the rhythm intact. The brain will attach the new words to the old melody instantly. I've used this with teenagers, adults, even business professionals. And every time, They laugh because they realize how quickly they remember things when melody is involved. That laughter, that moment of joy, that's pedagogical gold. Teachers often hesitate to use music because they feel they must sing well. No, you don't. The goal is not talent. The goal is engagement. Learners do not care if the teacher is Beyonce or not. They care that the teacher is human, that the teacher is willing to play, to model vulnerability, to step away from rigid structure for a moment. And music builds community. If you want a safe environment, music is one of the fastest pathways to it. And let me give you another story. One that still makes me smile. I once had a kindergarten class in which one little boy struggled intensely with English. He avoided speaking. He froze when asked questions. He rarely participated. One day, I brought a guitar. Nothing fancy. Just a simple acoustic. I began to play a slow, gentle tune and sang simple vocabulary. Hello, jump, open, close, run, stop. Suddenly, he joined in, quietly at first, then louder. That was the first time he had ever spoken more than one word in English in the class. So music opened a door that language alone could not. And this is something that I would like to add because we were talking about neurodivergent students. So this one, music, also helped them. For autistic learners, predictable melodies provide structures and safety. For ADHD learners, rhythm regulates attention. For dyslexic learners, musical prosody reinforces phonological structure. In other words, music doesn't just help, it equalizes. Now let's go even deeper. Some of you know I love exploring the philosophical layers of language. And music allows us to see language not as a code, but as an art form. When learners sing, they stop memorizing and they start feeling. They stop trying to speak correctly and start trying to speak expressively. Expression always leads to retention. We remember what we feel, and music makes us feel. And there's something sacred about the act of singing in another language. It connects you not just to grammar, but to people. It builds empathy. It opens emotional channels. And in a world where language learning sometimes feels mechanical, apps, algorithms, digital checklist, music reminds us that language is alive, breathing, and pulsating. And I want to leave you with one more reflection. Every language has a rhythm, a pulse. And when you find that pulse, truly find it, pronunciation stops being difficult. Memory stops being a struggle. Words stop feeling foreign. They become part of your own musical identity. So yes, music helps memorization. Yes, it helps pronunciation. But beyond that, it gives learners a voice, a real voice, a confident voice. One that carries melody, emotion, and meaning. And maybe that's why music has always been our species anchor. Because it teaches us that learning doesn't have to be silent. It can be beautiful, it can be joyful, and it can be sung. Until next time, keep finding the rhythm in every language you teach and every language you learn.